Man, how am I going to talk about this movie? Oh, I'm going to have to do a spoiler talk for sure. Full disclosure, I'll try to keep this as vague as I can. I won't touch upon anything in this movie that could potentially spoil Endgame if you haven't seen Endgame yet. I don't know how you haven't seen Endgame yet, but if you haven't seen Endgame yet, I'll keep it as vague as I can because this movie... Tom says it himself in the trailer.
That's some serious spoilers.
So with all that said and disclosed, here we go. Hey everybody, and thanks for clicking on this video and checking out my channel. I finally went out and caught the newest movie in the MCU, Spider-Man Far From Home. Directed once again by Jon Watts, returning from Spider-Man Homecoming, and starring Tom Holland, Zendaya, Jon Favreau, Jacob Batalon, Marissa Tomei, Samuel L. Jackson, Kobe Smulders, and Jake Gyllenhaal. So Spider-Man Far From Home follows up Endgame with Peter Parker returning to school, but when Peter's school is going on a class trip, Peter Parker wants to take a break from all the Spider-Man crime fighting and just go on a trip and hang out with the girl that he really likes in MJ, played once again by Zendaya. But when Nick Fury hijacks Peter's vacation for an Avengers assignment, Peter must team up with Jake Gyllenhaal's Mysterio to take down a supernatural threat that's happening in Europe while also making sure that his classmates stay safe, and that his identity doesn't get out there. So like I said, Spider-Man Far From Home does continue the MCU and pick up right after Avengers Endgame. If you haven't seen Avengers Endgame, the world of the MCU is a little different, and in Spider-Man Far From Home, they touch upon that. I really like how they touched upon the aftermath of Endgame and how it affected people's lives. In MCU style, they touch upon it in a comedic way, but they also do touch upon it in a kind of serious light. It's not overly dramatic or overly serious, but you do see how the events of Endgame have actually impacted people's lives living in the world of the MCU as of Spider-Man Far From Home. But a lot of the aftermath of Endgame is really just in the first part of the movie. And after that, the movie kind of ditches that and becomes its own thing and doesn't really focus on that aspect of the world. So in that regard, I was really looking forward to seeing that, and I got just enough to keep me satisfied, but I do wish there was a little bit more, and I hope they explored a little bit more in future MCU movies. But I think the first thing you gotta talk about with Spider-Man Far From Home is Tom Holland's Peter Parker. Tom Holland once again gives a great performance as the character of Peter Parker. He perfectly demonstrates and executes a kid who has these teenager instincts that he wants to act on, that he doesn't always want to be responsible. He really just wants to hang out with the girl that he likes on this trip and get to know her and take a break from being Spider-Man, but he can't ignore the bigger responsibility that he has. And when Nick Fury comes in and needs Peter's help as the Avengers Spider-Man, you really see the struggle that Peter Parker has with wanting to have a normal life while also not being able to ignore the huge responsibility that he knows he has. And I thought they really captured that in Spider-Man Far From Home and did it in a really simple and grounded way where Peter just wants to hang out with his friends and be a kid, but he's way more than a kid. He's an Avenger, and that's a big part of his life that he can't ignore. He's constantly struggling to find the balance between his normal life and his superhero life, and that's just the character of Peter Parker that I love, and they really kept that intact in this movie. And I love the way that they displayed and explored that struggle in his life in this movie. I also really love the character arc and the struggle that Peter Parker has emotionally and personally. There's a big event that happens in Endgame that really affects Peter, and because of that event and because of the way that it affects Peter, Peter has a lot of expectations now as an Avenger and with people in his life that he personally doesn't feel ready for. And you really see how those expectations on him really weigh on him. He doesn't feel qualified. He doesn't feel like he can meet those expectations. And I also really love the way that that was executed for Peter's character. I just love the way they handle Peter Parker's character in this movie and the way that they grow and evolve the character throughout this movie. And Tom Holland also gives a fantastic performance. Maybe one of his best performances of Peter Parker in this movie. There's one scene in particular where he's wearing a full mask and all you can see are the eyes. And just the emotion that Tom Holland puts in his eyes during a particular scene, you know everything that that character is feeling, what he's going through, and it's just marvelous no pun intended. It's just marvelous acting on Tom Holland's part, and I thought he did a really great job portraying all the emotion and personal conflict that Peter Parker is going through in this movie, as well as an awkward teenage boy who's dealing with the feelings for a girl that he really likes in high school. I really related to Peter Parker in that aspect of the movie, and I thought Tom Holland just nailed it. This might be my favorite performance by Tom Holland and the most relatable Peter Parker I've ever seen on screen. In my opinion, Tom Holland continues to be the greatest on-screen Peter Parker that we've seen so far. Another standout for me in this movie was Zendaya. In Spider-Man Homecoming, Zendaya's character of MJ I wasn't really a big fan of. I thought she was just a quirky weirdo. Placed throughout the movie because it was Zendaya and she was a big name. She was big in the marketing and the promotion of Spider-Man Homecoming, and I didn't feel like she had that much to do or add to the movie. So I was really disappointed with her character in Spider-Man Homecoming. In Spider-Man Far From Home, I really like her character. They did a lot more with the character of Michelle, played by Zendaya. And Zendaya brings a lot of insecurities to the character and makes the character a lot more likable in this movie. She's still a quote-unquote weirdo, but you can really see why Peter Parker would like this weirdo. And you really see why she is the way that she is by Zendaya's performance and also through what we learn about the character through Peter. Now, the newest member to this movie is Jake Gyllenhaal playing Mysterio. And Mysterio in the comics is a little weird. He's a little out there for a Spider-Man villain. He was never my favorite Spider-Man villain. He was never one that I thought of at the top of the list, like Green Goblin, Doc Ock, Venom. I even think Rhino over Mysterio. But the way that they incorporate Mysterio into this movie and keep him comic accurate is actually really impressive that they made it work. And Tom Holland and Jake Gyllenhaal have great chemistry together as these characters. I really like the dynamic that they had. And I just thought Jake Gyllenhaal did a great job as Mysterio. They also do some really cool effects with Mysterio. Because in the comics, Mysterio was this actor who turned villain, and he turned villain by using all of these Hollywood tricks and holograms to make himself appear as a hero. But it was all just illusions. And the way that they were able to pull off the illusions in this movie, they were able to change it to make it feel like it fits in the MCU. And also keep it very comic accurate. And I feel like it was translated from the comics to the screen very accurately, and I really like that, and I thought they did a great job pulling that off. And that's another thing that Spider-Man Far From Home really has going for it, is the action sequences. The first part of the movie isn't really that action-packed. It's really a teen high school comedy with Tom Holland wanting to talk to the girl, things getting in the way, slapstick, clumsy teacher dropping camera into a water. Not uninteresting stuff, but kind of uneventful stuff. Not that exciting. It's not really that high-scaled. Also, some of it's not very funny, but I'll get into the humor a little bit later. But the second half of the movie, that's where all the Spidey stuff really comes in. That's where the movie really succeeds, in my opinion. In fact, excels as a Spider-Man movie. This has some of the most fun Spider-Man action in it since probably Sam Raimi's films. And the action in this movie is much bigger and more exciting than it was in Spider-Man Homecoming. And the action set pieces and just the way that they move Spider-Man and have Spider-Man acrobatics is just really fun to watch. It looks great. I'll just never get tired of Spider-Man swinging through the city. And just the way that his fighting choreography in this movie I thought was really, really good and a lot of fun to watch. It was really fast-paced and exciting. And I just thought that Jon Watts did a much better job with the action in this movie than in Spider-Man Homecoming. Going into some of the negatives of Spider-Man Far From Home, the biggest one for me was the humor. Because the humor in this movie, humor is all subjective, so this is really just a me problem, not really the movie's problem. But some of the humor in the movie felt really forced to me. I talked about the camera dropping in the water. That particular joke is a teacher holding a camera on a bridge over water. He drops it. But the way that he fumbled it, it just looked like it was done on purpose. It didn't look very comedically dropped. It just looked like and then he just dropped it. I don't know. The execution on that joke didn't really make me laugh. There's a couple of also really strange jokes in this movie for a Spider-Man film. There's one joke in particular that involves Peter in his underwear with another girl and a classmate walking in on them, which I just thought was really strange in a Spider-Man film. It just didn't really... I don't know, it just didn't really work for me. I thought it was just a little too weird. The setup for the joke felt weird. The way that the joke plays out feels weird. It was just a really weird joke and a weird bit. But this movie does have some really funny stuff in it, some funny lines, and some bits that work. There's just a lot of humor in it that personally didn't really work for me. Or just felt kind of forced, strange, or just simply fell flat. And going back to the Endgame aftermath that I touched upon at the beginning, I liked how it was done, but this is the first MCU movie that was kind of strange because I could kind of feel like the filmmakers didn't want to add that in the movie, but they had to because Kevin Feige or the people at Marvel said that they had to because it's connected to the MCU and we have to touch upon this. So the way that it is addressed kind of feels like an afterthought. It doesn't feel like the movie wants to do that, and then when it finally gets over the hump of we've done it, we're going to move on and do our movie now, I can kind of feel where that came in. And it was weird because that was the first time in the MCU that I've ever felt that. And it also causes them to add in a character that I didn't really feel was necessary to be there. I didn't hate the character or anything. The character was there to be another obstacle for Peter to overcome, but I felt like Peter already had enough obstacles to overcome that character could have been taken out of the movie and you wouldn't have missed anything. And also could have cut out a couple scenes because this movie does feel a little overlong. I was starting to feel the length a little bit of this movie at a certain point. So I feel like the movie could have been cut down just a little bit, and I feel like if you had taken that character out, it would have had a much better pace. And there's also a couple conveniences that when you really think about it, it's like, wait, that had to happen for this to happen. That's interesting. In order for this to happen, that would have to happen, and that can't happen because they already... It's best if you don't think about it. But a couple of those conveniences and plot holes were in the back of my head throughout the film. And there's also a moment in the movie where a character gives a whole bunch of exposition to explain a motivation, and it was done in a way that it kind of just felt like the movie stopped in order for this character to spew out all this information. It kind of ruined the flow of the pacing that the movie had. It just kind of stopped in its tracks, explained some stuff, and then kept going. It kind of almost felt like a pit stop in the movie, which was kind of strange to me. But there is some cool stuff within there that I can't get into. There's so much in this movie I can't get into. But those are just a couple of the negatives and issues that kind of keep me from saying that I love this movie. I really, really liked Spider-Man Far From Home. It had a lot of great stuff in it. Great performances from Tom Holland and Zendaya. Those two had great chemistry, as well as Peter and MJ. They were perfectly awkward together. They perfectly captured a crush in high school and trying to deal with that crush. And it was just something that I really related to in this movie. The action is really great. The Spider-Man stuff is so much fun. It's really cool to see Spider-Man outside of New York. Like, just seeing him in a different environment was also a lot of fun and really refreshing. This feels the most different from all the other Spider-Man movies because it did something different. It wasn't in New York, it was in a different setting. It had Peter dealing with something that's so average and ordinary that we hadn't seen in the other Spider-Man films, and I really liked just the kind of breath of fresh air that this movie was. And yeah, I don't know if you've heard about the hype for the post-credit scenes, but it lives up to the hype. I was sitting there, my jaw dropped, and then something happened that I was just in the theater going, ah! I couldn't believe it was happening. It was so cool. Definitely stay for the post-credit scenes, especially the first post-credit scene. The first post-credit scene is really the end of the movie. If you leave at the end of the movie and don't catch that first post-credit scene, you didn't see the end of the movie, and you're going to be kicking yourself when you find out what you missed. And guys, in the end, those are all my thoughts and opinions on Spider-Man Far From Home that I can talk about here. I'm gonna do a spoiler review. I have to do a spoiler review. There's so much that I want to talk about that I've got to spoil it all, and I'm gonna talk about that. But as it is, that is my official Spider-Man Far From Home review. I really, really liked the movie. I don't know if I liked it more than Spider-Man Homecoming. Spider-Man Homecoming felt like it had the tighter script, but Far From Home has the better Spider-Man stuff in it, and I kind of lean towards Far From Home, honestly. When I left the theater, I thought, no, Homecoming's still my favorite. But after thinking about it and having time to marinate on it, I don't know, Far From Home might surpass it. But what did you guys think? Comment down below, let me know. I want to know all your thoughts and opinions about Spider-Man Far From Home. And is it better than Homecoming in your opinion? And as always, guys, thank you so much for clicking on this video and checking out my channel. My name's Zachary Milne. Thank you for talking movies with me, and hope you have yourself a great day.